Well, good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and call the executive committee meeting to order. Clerk, please take the roll.
Good morning, members. If you can please make the selections on your tablets. Chair, we have a quorum with 4 members present and 3 members absent.
Thank you. Let's move to non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anybody who'd like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of the committee. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
Yes, we do. We currently have one. David Roger, if you can please make your way to the podium.
Good morning. Here's the monthly update on MTS. Balboa Station was built 4 years and 4 months ago. There's 12 monitors that do the schedule. 1 works. This was reported in October of 2025, still not working. Next problem, construction on the Orange Line. Whatever you guys have done in 2026 is literally, I tried to take the trolley Saturday at 4 o'clock. There was no notifications. There was nobody helping anybody, telling you here they were closed or any of these problems. The actual schedules show that the trolley is still running. They have a lame-ass little sign that says, here's the 4 different levels. And on each one of those levels, it shows 3 or 4 months, not dates or anything that it's being worked on. It just says will not be there. So legitimately, for the rest of the year, for 4 months on each one of those stations of repairs, it's closed. The third thing, 5th Avenue Trolley Station, after 1:30, MTS should be getting paid commission on the amount of consumption of drugs being sold and consumed in the station, because, you know, there's a video that's got a couple million views of it occurring. Let's see. I think here's kind of a hint for MTS and all of its employees. Maybe you guys ought to be able to take public transit at least 10 days out of the year so that you can see who your customers are, called people who ride it, and understand how bad it really is. Thank you.
That concludes public comments, Chair.
Thank you. Let's move to approval of the minutes of the February 5th, 2026 meeting of the Executive Committee. Clerk, do we have any public comment on the minutes?
We do not, Chair.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
All right. We have a motion by Vice Chair Goebel and a second by Director Elo Rivera. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, clerk, please take the vote.
Members, if you can please make your selections on the tablets. Chair, the motion passes with 4 members voting yes and 3 members absent.
All right, let's move to our discussion items. Item 4 is the fiscal year 2026 operating budget mid-year amendment, and we're going to get the presentation from Gordon Meyer.
Good morning, Gordon Meyer, Manager of Financial Planning. As mentioned, this morning I'm going to cover the FY26 operating budget amendment. So we'll look at different categories of our overall operating budget. The first major category is operating revenues, and our primary operating revenue is passenger revenue. So first component of that is ridership. So in the original budget, we had budgeted 86.2 million passengers. So that's represented by the green line in the chart to the right. That target represented 6.5% growth over last year's FY25 final ridership. So far in FY26, we have a ridership problem. We've been averaging 1.3% below last year's ridership. So we looked at the trends we've seen in the first half of the year and what we're projecting for the second half of the year by operator and consolidated that all into a new forecast. We're now projecting 80.8 million passengers. That's a reduction of 5.4 million passengers, or 6.2% from the original budget. So you can see that visually. What we're projecting is the dashed blue line. The purple line is last year's actual ridership, and then the green line was the original budget. So that new ridership target of $80.8 million represents essentially flat growth from last year at a -0.1%. So that's ridership. The other component when coming up with this forecast is average fare. So the original budget assumed $1.04. That target was 7.6% above last year's final average fare. So far, we have seen significant growth of 6.1%, but not as high as that 7.6% that we targeted. If you'll remember back to last year, we started new fare enforcement in February of 2025. That's really what's driven that year-over-year increase so far. However, we are expecting that year-over-year change to shrink dramatically when we get into this February because we don't have that external change that's going to be driving more average fare increase. And so you can see visually what that looks like. You can see we are building in still that year-over-year growth for the dashed blue line before February, and then it tightens up significantly. We have seen a little bit higher average fare on the bus side, so we are building that in. So that's why the dashed blue line is a little bit higher than last year's actuals. So we're now projecting $1 for average fare in the new forecast, and that represents just under 4% year-over-year growth. So passenger revenue as a whole, we had budgeted $89.2 million. Based on our ridership and average fare assumptions, we were targeting a 14.5% year-over-year growth. So far through December, we've seen 4.7% year-over-year growth. So we're still seeing growth, but well short of that original target. We are, based on our new ridership and average fare assumptions, bringing the passenger revenue budget down by $8.4 million or about 9%. So that new annual revenue target represents 3.8% growth, so well short of what we were originally projecting. Next category within operating revenues is other operating revenues. So I won't go into all the different categories, but you can see how the different categories are changing in that top table to the right. The two worth mentioning as far as change goes is real estate related revenues. That's primarily land management leasing revenues. We have an updated leasing schedule, and based on that, we are projecting about a $520,000 increase there. In total, these real estate related revenues are increasing by just under $600,000 in the amended budget. The biggest change in the amended budget is for this category is interest revenue. So we are bringing up the interest rate assumption from 3.1 to 3.7% based on what we saw in the first half of the year. We are still assuming one more drop this fiscal year. And then we're also increasing the average cash balance assumption from 166 to 188 million. So based on that, we are projecting over $1 million increase in interest revenue. So overall, these other operating revenues are increasing by $1.6 million from the original budget. Moving on to the next category within revenues, it's subsidy revenue. And one of our major subsidy revenue sources is sales tax. And for us, that's primarily Transnet and TDA. So on the Transnet side, we build the original budgets based off of forecasts that are provided by Sandag before the new fiscal year. And so based on that original forecast, it assumed $422 million for the region. After sharing with the other agencies, we were projected to receive $40.3 million. So good news here this year is that cash receipts have exceeded what was budgeted so far in the original forecast. And so Sandag has updated those forecasts. We just received a new one in January, and they're increasing that regional target by 3.4%. There's also a third party called Avenue that Sandag hires to do an independent forecast. They're right in that same region of $437 million for the region. So it's good to see those two close together. We are basing our amended budget based on Sandag's forecast of $436 million. Based on that, we're expecting $42 million for MTS. So that leads to about a $1.6 million increase in our operating budget this year, or 3.9%. We also receive a direct reimbursement from Sandag for the net cost of operating our bus rapid transit and mid-coast services. We're bumping that up in the amended budget by $208,000, and that's just based on the forecasted expenses for those services. TDA, so TDA is a little different from Transnet in that where Transnet we receive as the cash is generated. For TDA, we file a claim in the beginning of the year based on Sandag's forecast. And then if actual cash receipts come in higher than that claim amount, that excess goes into a reserve at the county. If cash receipts come in lower, then we draw from that reserve at the county to make sure that we receive that initial claim amount. And so here, good news as well, Sandag is revising their forecast from 195 million to 206 million. So that's a 5.8% increase. So pretty significant impact there. Avenue, the third party, is actually forecasting a little bit higher, a 7.7% increase. We are basing the amended budget on Sandag's more conservative forecast. And so what that means for MTS is our share is expected to increase from 128 million to 134 million. All of that increase is going to into this year's operating budget, and we're leaving the capital budget unchanged. So that results in about a $6.2 million increase in TDA in this amended operating budget. Next, we have STA, so that's the state sales tax on diesel fuel. It's distributed based on a formula. We base the initial budget on the state controller's January 2025 projection. So we've received the 2026 governor's budget proposal, and in that proposal is showing a $2 million decrease from 34 million to about 32 million. This does get split between the capital budget and the operating budget. So we typically put 11.3 million in the operating budget, and then anything in excess of that goes into the capital budget. So with this $2 million decrease, we're putting that all in the operating budgets. So a $2 million reduction in the amended budget. Last slide on subsidy revenue, we have our SB 125 funding. So this was the $4 billion that was distributed to transit agencies through the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. So MTS has received this historically. It's typically a competitive grant award. We've received a bunch of large dollar capital projects. A few years ago, it was for the first time distributed based on a formula, and you could also use it for operations to help transit agencies and their financial struggles. And so we are, when it's all said and done, expected to receive 237 million. We've received over half of that so far. And you can see the different activities that are funded in our operating budget and the changes we're expecting in the amended budget. So the security, Iris Rapid, Route 910 reimbursement, we're projecting that to be a little lower than what we had projected originally based on the projected expenses for those services. Trolley service increasing a little bit, but really the main takeaway here is that bottom line for structural deficit balancing. So this is our funding that will be used to balance our operating budget until it runs out. And so we initially planned on using over 10 million in this year's budget to balance the budget. But we had more than planned in our operating deficit reserve due to favorable budget results last year. So this year we need about 6.6 million less of SB 125 funding to balance our budget, but our reserve usage will be higher, as we'll see more clearly on the next slide. So SB 125 revenues overall coming down by 7.4 million. So here's the summary of all of our revenues combined. You can see the operating revenues coming down by 6.8 million, led by the decrease in passenger revenue. Then within subsidy, we're really being saved this year by the increase in sales tax forecast, which is mostly offsetting that decrease in passenger revenue right now. And then you can see that decrease of 7.4 million in SB 125. And kind of the offset to that is the second line from the bottom, which is reserves. So here we initially planned on using 62 million of reserves to balance our budget. Because we have a higher amount available, based on the favorable budget results last year, we're able to use about 68 million, and that will be the end of our operating deficit reserve. FY26, that will be depleted, and then it will solely be SB 125 funding to balance our budget. So taking all that into consideration, our total revenues are projected at 471 million, a decrease of 2 million from the original budget. Moving on to the expenses. So before we look at the actual categories, just want to give a little brief overview of what that looked like this year. So we met with all the departments to review their proposed spending plans. We do that every year. But a little differently this year is that staff were directed from the beginning to identify and reflect any belt tightening opportunities in their budgets. Just look for any efficiencies. Is this a nice to have? Let's not include it. We also asked them to evaluate any open positions in their department to see if they could be frozen. We also asked them for large dollar operating projects that they need to be strictly necessary, primarily state of good repair activities. And so that's reflected. We also, the planning department has been analyzing the current service to look for minor service efficiencies. And so they were able to find some that were implemented in the January 2026 service level. So the scheduled miles are coming down a little bit. And then lastly, we did expect them to spend extra care looking at the timing of their budget requests. So lots of times we'll get a request for like $1 million project. You know, it might get started right at the end of the fiscal year. So you have half of it hit this year, half of it next year. And we're really trying to avoid that so we can best plan with the resources that we have. And so all those things are reflected in the expenses on the coming slides. So first category is personnel. It's made up of wages and fringe benefits. So on the wage side, administration wages are decreasing by 421,000, led by a decrease in forecasted security wages. They're not fully staffed right now, and that hiring has been slower than assumed in the original budget. We also have one staff attorney position that's been frozen for almost the entire fiscal year, so that impacts that as well. The big change here is within bus operations. So we're decreasing the budget here by $2 million or 3.6%. That's almost all in operator wages. And it's really being driven by a reduction in overtime. So we've been hovering around 500 operators, which is our highest staffing levels in recent history. And we are, so it's mainly a reduction in overtime that's driving that. We also did overshoot the overall hours forecast a little bit as well. So it's kind of a combination of both. Worth mentioning in the position table, which is an attachment to the agenda item, we are freezing 20 operator positions within bus, and that's not layoffs. It's just our new updated target based on the final service levels that went into effect in January. And that is just a reflection in the position tables, but it's not going to drive a significant savings in the actual budget. On the trolley side, very minor increase in terms of dollars, but we did want to highlight the fact that 9 positions are currently being frozen. There was a revenue maintainer that's been open and they decided not to fill it. They can make do with the employees that they have. 2 collector processors, we're no longer collecting revenue on the weekends, and so they were able to leave those positions unfilled. 6 train operator positions are being frozen. Those had not been filled yet, but they were added to the position table, I believe, last year for the plan that we were originally going to go to 7.5-minute service on the entire blue line. Because our service levels are frozen right now, we do not need those additional positions. So we're freezing those. And then there is a request to convert 2 part-time construction safety flag persons to 2 full-time, which is a net addition of 1 FTE. That's more of a capacity reflection in the position table. And that's really to accommodate some of the major capital projects that are going on within our system right now. So overall wages are projected to decrease by 2.4 million. Within the position table, it's 30 frozen positions being offset by 1 net addition of an FTE from doing that conversion to full-time. Fringe benefits, so you can see the different categories in the table, but the 2 big drivers here are healthcares and others. So healthcare costs are projected to decrease by 1.2 million or over 5%. That is due to updating the projected employee share, which is expected to increase by 1.1 million. And that is based on the final premium increases for 2026, as well as the current collective bargaining agreements that all went into effect last year and some of them this year as well. Other, which is decreasing by 880,000 overall, includes cost recovery. So cost recovery is a negative expense. It's reimbursement for the construction flagging wages. So anytime those employees are used on capital projects, there's a credit to the operating budget. And because there's a lot of major capital projects going on, specifically the Orange Line improvement, we're seeing a large increase in flagging wages, but also a large increase in cost recovery. So overall fringe costs decreasing by 1.7 million or 2.1%. Outside services, once again, the different categories are there. The two main changes in the amended budget are within repair and maintenance and other outside services. So for repair and maintenance, overall, the costs are increasing by 1.7 million. That's led by a $2 million increase in the track department. And that's primarily due to the budget for tie replacement. The original budget request last year was for 3.8 million. We put $1 million in the operating budget to make sure the contract could be in place and that we would actually be able to spend that full 3.8 million. Everything's in place. It will be able to be spent by June 30th. And so we are putting the full 3.8 million in the amended budget. On the other outside services section, it's increasing by 2.3 million overall. Once again, that's being led by increases in rail, specifically 1.2 million for some rail replacement at 11th and C. And then we had a variety of different hazard repairs on Commercial Street and Massachusetts Avenue that needed to be repaired as well. Bus operations, there's a couple projects at the Imperial Avenue and Kearney Mesa divisions that need to get done this fiscal year that are also included. So overall, these outside services costs are increasing by 4.1 million or 7.2%. And then did just want to highlight that these are all what we deem as necessary state of good repair projects. Purchase transportation. So that is our contracted bus service. We have two major contracts. We have one with Transdev that operates our East County and South Bay garages. And then we have another contract that used to be First Transit, but is now Transdev. And that is for our minibus and paratransit services, which operate out of Copley Park. So for the large fixed route Transdev contracts, the costs are expected to decrease by 776,000 or just under 1%. That's right in line with the scheduled reduction in revenue miles based on those minor service efficiencies that were implemented in January. On the minibus side, we're expecting a $350,000 decrease. We're reducing the scheduled revenue miles there as well by 2.2%. And then there's also some favorable performance bonuses that are driving that budget figure down. And then paratransit, it's a little different because it's a demand-based service, so we can't schedule that. But we are expecting the budget for that to decrease by 1.3 million or about 6%. One driver here is that we had budgeted 70,000 per month or 840,000 per year for a payment that we were making to Transdev. It was a contractual amendment where we were helping them with the lower service levels left over from COVID. So we were going to be making this payment until we hit 85% of the pre-COVID service demand for 3 consecutive months. We hit that in June of 26. So we haven't paid that at all this year and we're done with it. And so that was 840,000 in savings right off the top. So that's reflected. We're also budgeting about a 1% decrease in billable revenue hours. Once again, that's demand based. So it's a forecast. And then also for favorable performance bonuses here as well. So overall purchase transportation costs coming down by 2.4 million. Next slide, energy. So the two major components of our energy budget are electricity and compressed natural gas. On the electricity side, we're still forecasting to be very close to our budgeted rate. We're forecasting 39 cents per kilowatt hour. We are bringing down our budget for consumption a little bit based on what we've seen so far in our scheduled miles for the rest of the year. We would be forecasting to be about $2 million favorable on this line item, but we did receive 2 catch-up invoices from SDG&E for 2 substations that haven't been billed for 3+ years. And so that was kind of a surprise, but reflected in the budget. With that catch-up payment, we're expecting electricity expenses to increase by about 86,000. On the CNG side, we continue to see favorable commodity rates. We're bringing the commodity rate down by 18% from what we had originally budgeted. The overall rate, which includes the SDG&E costs as well, is coming down by about 5%. We're leaving consumption at the original budget. And so we are expecting about a $700,000 reduction for CNG. So our overall energy budget, which includes gas, propane, and some of the other utilities that we pay, is expected to decrease by just under $500,000. Risk management. So we are expecting a particularly bad year for claim payments. So we have several large cases where the timing is unknown. They might settle this year, they might settle next year. So we're taking kind of a middle ground of what we're expecting. Don't want to go too much into the details here because it's ongoing litigation, but do want to remind the board that there's $7.5 million set aside in a specific reserve, self-insurance reserve, specifically meant to cover extraordinary costs. And so we do anticipate using some of that in FY26 with a plan to replenish what we use this year in future fiscal years. Within risk management, the premiums are projected to decrease by almost 600,000. That's mostly on the property side. We had built in a 21% year-over-year increase based on how the last few years have gone. But then we got those final rates and it was about an 11% increase. So that's reflected. So all that together, we are projecting about a $983,000 increase to risk management expenses. Last slide on expenses. So I think the one worth mentioning here is materials and supplies. The original budget included $1.2 million for a ticket vending machine credit card module upgrade project. That budget is being moved to FY27 and cut in half because our fair system manager was able to negotiate based on some specific contract clauses to get that figured down quite a bit. This typically within materials, we're talking about revenue vehicle parts and trolley revenue vehicle parts. That's usually the driver. We're expecting a little bit of an increase on the bus side, but trolley we're expecting to remain flat versus the original budget. And then there's some increases on the track and MOW side for equipment costs. G&A is increasing 267,000, and then vehicle and facility leasing costs are projected to increase by 178,000. So summary of expenses on this slide. Overall, we're projecting 471 million in expenses. That's a decrease of 2 million from the original budget. The decrease in personnel and purchase transportation are the big ones, being offset by that increase, partially offset by that increase in outside services. So here's a look at our amended budget with all the different components combined. So here you can see recurring revenues are projected to decrease by 526,000 from the original budget. Expenses are projected to decrease by about 2 million. So we are projecting a structural deficit of 106.5 million. That's about 1.5 million less than what we were originally projecting. So small change, but in the right direction. In order to get to our overall balanced budget, we need to include the non-recurring items. So that's the 68 million that we'll be using from the reserves, the 25 million that was shifted from the capital budget to the operating budget, and then the 14 million in SB 125 funding. With those, we do have a balanced budget for FY26. And that brings me to the staff recommendation for this item, that the San Diego MTS Executive Committee forward a recommendation to the MTS Board to enact resolution number 26-3, amending the FY26 operating budget for MTS, SDTC, San Diego Trolley, MTS Contract Services, and the Coronado Ferry. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
All right, we will open committee member discussion on this item, and we'll begin with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gordon, for a nice, concise thing. Let's go back to slide 2, please. With a softening of bus ridership, do we have a sense, is it bus? Is it trolley?
We're missing our targets primarily on the trolley side this year. Our bus ridership is actually doing better versus budget than trolley. So,
and on the trolley side, is that because there's less large events or a station that's?
So we've been examining it, and one, we're seeing it across the country that border regions are facing lower transit ridership in relation to fears of traveling due to ICE activities. But two, we also always see it where people will travel less, even though transit is their primary mode of transportation, if their household expenses are too high and they can't afford to do other leisure activities and things like that. So you will see the number of trips that people will take will be lower because they can't spend on activities, you know, going to the grocery store or whatever. So I think it's a combination of things. We also had a particularly rainy, odd winter for a few weeks there, and that will impact ridership. So we're going to monitor it, but definitely it's a trend across the country, especially in major metropolitan areas.
And so when you say the couple of things you mentioned, are we seeing a softness down in South Bay versus UCSD, or is there a geographical component to this?
No, I mean, our planning department has looked at it and it's kind of across the board on trolley.
Okay, thanks. Slide 9, please. So when this in the table there, the structural deficit balancing, we were going to allocate 10 million from SB 125. Now we're only allocating 3 million. That does, am I right in thinking we're just stretching out that SB 125 money further into future years?
Correct.
Okay. It's not like we're losing it or not getting it. Okay, let's go to slide 16, please. You mentioned something about the catch-up payment for 2 substations that haven't been built yet. That kind of leads me to believe we're getting billed for something that we're not yet enjoying. What am I thinking about that?
No, so we have 73 substations. Their meters are changing all the time. The account numbers are changing all the time. And so this is something we're actively looking at and reporting on. This specific case was 2 substations where there was a repair that was supposed to be made like 3 years ago. The communication between San Diego or SDG&E and MTS broke down, and so this thing went unfixed. And so there was no billing on these 2 substations for over 3 years. And so it was eventually fixed and they've resumed billing, but we were using the substations for those 3 years, but we were never billed.
Okay.
And so it was, they called a meeting and we got it all sorted out, but it was a temporary $1.8
And
million.
SDG&E is required to claw back rates from ratepayers 3 years, I believe it is, right? And so that's as far back as they were able to gain our revenue back. So that's what the 1.8 million is.
Okay, sounds good. Looking at the CNG rates, that's really, I'm glad we have CNG buses. North County Transit is just having a horrible time with their hydrogen buses. I've seen it cost $2,200 to fill a bus versus $500 for a CNG. So I'm glad that we have CNG. It's near zero, seems to be saving us economically in some ways at this point. So kudos to the bus team for its foresight in that area. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Let's go to Director Moreno.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And to say that this is daunting, I think is an understatement, right? The one thing I wanted to point out is, did you say there's a 6.5% decrease in ridership? Because what I'm reading here is
so ridership is averaging about 1.3% below last year. Let me see what.
So yeah, I saw the original budget assumed 86.2 million passengers for the year, a target of 6.5% growth over and compared to fiscal year 2025. So we just didn't get that growth that we forecasted.
Correct.
Correct, right? Was that a trend that we were following based on previous year's ridership, or were we being overly ambitious on that number?
So it was basically on the ridership side was a continuation of the growth that we saw. We saw an actual, it might've been closer to 7 in FY 25 over 24. So in our 5-year forecast, we had that growth gradually tapering down, but we definitely didn't have it going flat in 26. Yeah.
Got you. So our ridership from last year actually went down 1 point something percent, the actual numbers.
this year's ridership versus last year's, but last year's ridership versus FY 24 was significant growth in the
I
6 to
remember that.
7%
Yeah,
range.
7% growth, which we were all really happy about. I was curious to hear what you stated about the border region. And is there any way to get more numbers? I don't know if there are other large municipalities that have I'm sure they have bus systems, but I don't know if they have trolleys. So I'm just curious if later on I could see some more information regarding that, please. And then I agree with your comment on CNG, Vice Chair Gobel. I think we've definitely had a lot of discussion on, what are we going to electrify? Are we going to hydrogen? Are we going to CNG? And I have noticed a trend of going away from CNG, a lot of folks going away from CNG and headed more towards the electrification. So I think that kudos to staff, Mike in particular, kudos to staff on diversifying really the method that of our energy, I guess I should say. Also, you mentioned that there was a reserve, an STA reserve at the county. Did I catch that correctly?
TDA reserve.
TDA reserve. And how much is there?
Ooh, I don't have that number off the top of my head.
It's typically around 5% of the cash receipts projected. So it's in the $20 million range at this point in time.
Okay.
And that's total between us and North County that's being shared, but they typically require to have it be a 5% of what expected receipts are. The county does.
20 million shared between North County and MTS.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we might need to dip into those funds, right? Or can we not dip into those funds?
We can request it, but typically they want us to pay it right back anyway. So it's not something that we can go under for very long, but we can in times of crisis. We have gone under that 5% reserve and drawn some of that funding, especially normally it happens when cash receipts do not come near the initial projection and MTS still gets their claim amount, but the reserve takes a little bit of a hit, but there is a replenishment process that is looked at every year by Sandag and by the county.
Got you. Well, I think considering our structural deficit, we might be really extremely close to asking for that funding. And you mentioned there was only a $2 million difference between the amended and the projected budget. Is that correct?
Correct. In terms of the structural deficit, yes.
Okay, I try to add and subtract all the numbers and I had a really hard time getting to that. So maybe I need a briefing from you at another time. Is this an actionable item? Okay, I'm happy to it's awful, but I'm happy to make a motion to approve staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Moreno. Let's go to Director Elo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation here. And I appreciate the questions that my colleagues asked. Are there any strategies in place to boost ridership or offset some of the shortfalls that we've seen thus far?
Yeah, we have a couple of ridership campaigns that we'll be launching this spring to try to enhance that. We're also developing a new one related to the rising cost of gasoline. We've done this in the past when gas has skyrocketed the way it is now, and it's been successful in getting out the message that we're a cheaper option for you. So we are trying to take advantage of some of these. Another one we're trying to do is build ridership in along the Orange Line, in particular La Mesa, and so we're going to have targeted ridership campaigns for those areas.
Do any of the campaigns get to addressing what your theory is behind some of the reasons that we're not hitting the projected ridership that we thought we'd have?
With regard to, for instance, economics, household economics, our hope is that
no, more so the fears that folks might have of getting on the trolley. What are we doing? I know that we've talked about doing things to indicate to our riders that their safety matters to us, and we're not going to do anything to be complicit in putting them in jeopardy. If one of the theories behind us not hitting our marks is that folks are scared to travel, which makes perfect sense. What are we doing to alleviate those fears, if anything?
Yeah, so we are working with the county on trying to get the signage and campaign going with regard to know your rights on board. And certainly we're trying to make our own transit enforcement be a source of solace for our customers, for lack of a better term for it, but to really make it so that they feel comfortable riding, that there are people on the system who will have, their eyes open. And we have been monitoring there haven't been activities along the system. So we are continuously monitoring for that.
Well, I haven't heard about a trend of activities along the system, but I've heard about activities along the system. We can talk about that later, but I don't know that we've been immune from it, or at least the areas around the transit system have been immune from some of the ICE enforcement activities. So some of the and I understand why we need to make decisions like freezing positions. Can you talk to us about the difference between freezing and eliminating positions in terms of how MTS approaches that? I know what that means at the city, but I heard freeze. I didn't hear eliminate. I might have missed that. In terms of addressing the structural budget deficit, when does the conversation about eliminating a position start to take place rather than just freezing it?
I think we would keep freezing until we get through the ballot measure period. And once we have a decision on how that's going to look, then we would decide okay, these are going to be eliminated at that point in time, or we need to add them back if we can bring our service levels back up. So that's why we're freezing for this next few year period, just to know they won't be, so the board will know it won't be filled, but we don't want to eliminate them at this point in time yet because we're not ready to. Does that make sense?
It does, but what does that mean when we're looking at the structural deficit?
It means that there's no dollars associated with those frozen positions. So it really is a savings in the operating budget for now, but they're just not eliminating that position, so we don't have to add it back. Basically, you can see the impact of how much has been frozen over that period of time.
Okay. And what will the impact be on the workers as a result of those positions being frozen?
Yeah, it's usually, these are already open positions, so there's no impact on any workers in those positions. They're just not being.
No, yeah, I don't mean people like losing their jobs. I mean, like, are people doing more work? Are they being stretched more thin? Are they not getting the same sort of time off or breaks? Like when there are oftentimes spillover effects on the workers who are who remain when positions are either eliminated or not filled.
Well, for instance, the frozen positions in the revenue department, the revenue maintainer, it was for accounting purposes for cash, and cash is significantly lower now. So we went to a pattern of, instead of having people counting cash on the weekends, we were able to eliminate that, because we did have people who were, they would count the cash in the morning, then they'd sit around waiting for cash to come in, and then they count it in the afternoon. So there's there were economies that we could put in place because of the Pronto system.
And this is a little bit uncomfortable. Are we asking the same sort of questions all the way up the ladder of the organization?
Well, for instance, we froze an attorney's position, a staff attorney that we had created 2 years ago. And that was in the interest of trying to get some bigger, more holistic projects that Karen and Samantha could focus on. And then this staff attorney could kind of take on the less of that. And instead, I think what we've moved on to is relying on our outside counsel a little bit more, and then, Karen and Samantha do what they can to keep up with the other stuff.
Right. So yes, we looked all the way up the ladder, or is
It
that-
was a brand new position, so we hadn't quite done the whole redistribution of work in the legal department when there's only 3 people. It's not, do you want to comment about
Yeah,
that?
I actually am like less, that all makes sense. I'm asking, that's an important decision to make, right? Where these positions are no longer serving the same purpose that they initially served. The workload has significantly changed. It doesn't make sense to have the same number of staff in this position. I guess what I'm asking is, are we doing that all the way up the ladder and saying, you know, this person who had supervisory roles, management roles, doesn't have the same number of workers under them now. We can be more efficient at the management level. I just want to make sure that we're doing that all the way up the ladder of the organization.
Yeah, and that is something that we are very carefully looking at. I've asked that and I have to approve the hiring of anybody. And so in the event that in the management and administration side of the house, I approve all of these, and I carefully assess whether or not they can accommodate a freezing of the position at the time.
Okay.
So we are carefully monitoring that. We have not suggested yet, and we're not suggesting in the next agenda item, which is the FY 2027. We're not suggesting a wholesale cut 10% of your staff at this time.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion on this item from Director Moreno. I'll go ahead and second the motion, and the action item will forward a recommendation to the Board of Directors to amend the fiscal year 2026 operating budget as described. Clerk, please take the vote.
Members, if you can please make your selections on the tablets. Chair, the motion passes with 5 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
Thank you. Item 5 is the fiscal year 2027 operating budget, and Gordon Meyer is going to present this item as well.
All right, so moving on to a first look at the FY 27 operating budget. So before we start, just want to, this is really kind of a first look at some of the assumptions that we're going to be making and how things are shaping out right now. We still have a ton of work to do for 27, but this is really to kind of get us all on the same page as we go into the next couple months and fully build out the operating budget. So on the passenger revenue side, so just going back to the last presentation, we're projecting flat ridership. So looking forward to FY 27, based on the data that we have right now, we'd be looking at budgeting flat ridership again, or maybe low growth. But we really want to see the data from January, February, and March before we finalize this forecast. So most likely flat to low growth for ridership. On the average fare side, because we've already had a full year now of fare enforcement, we're not going to be expecting any material change. And so really the only factor that would cause a change to the average fare at this point would be the decision from the fare study. So that process is underway. The public feedback phase is ongoing right now. I think the schedule is for the final decision to be made by the MTS board in April, and then it would go for the final approval for the region to SANDAG's board in June, which is after our budget adoption scheduled for May. So yeah, the decision point will have a huge impact on our passenger revenue budget. Did want to mention that Youth Opportunity Pass funding has been identified by SANDAG for the next 3 years. And so that will be reflected in the budget. And then just wanted to reiterate the impact of our passenger revenue forecast. not only on the FY27 budget, but probably more importantly, the 5-year forecast. In the last 5-year forecast that came to the board, we had built in 6% growth in 27, then 5, then 5, 4, and 4. And so we still had significant growth built in. So if now we're budgeting flat growth for FY26, most likely flat for FY27. So that compounding effect can have a pretty significant impact on our 5-year forecast. So just want to reiterate that. On the subsidy side, so for federal operating revenues, our current authorizing legislation expires on September 30th of 2026, so about a quarter into FY27. That funding is particularly important for us because we spend over 72 million in the operating budget for our preventive maintenance expenses. And so we need that reauthorization. And in terms of funding levels, right now we're assuming status quo. We're not building in any growth. We're not building in a reduction, but the funding levels remain to be seen. On the sales tax side, we have Sandag's January 2026 forecast, so we'll be using those for the FY27 budget. They're forecasting 2.1% growth for Transnet and then 1% on the TDA side. We will be reflecting the additional 25 million shift from the capital budget to the operating budget. So that brings the total shift to 50 million. That was part of the board approved financial strategy from November. For the operating reimbursement for Transnet, inflation and cost increases will drive that. That'll be dependent on our final expense forecast. STA, so from the last presentation, we brought the amount down by $2 million in the FY26 amended budget. We're restoring that to 11.3 million in FY27. And then on the SB 125 side, we're expecting to use 10 to 12 million for our service enhancements that are in place. And then we're projecting very high level at this point to need about 35 to 45 million for our deficit balancing. So that is within kind of the range that we've been bringing to the board until this point. So it's not a shock factor. So moving on, that's kind of what we know so far on the revenue side. So moving on to the expenses. So one of the major drivers of our expenses is service levels. So on the rail side, we're scheduling a 1.3% increase in service levels. On the fixed route bus side, our current draft of scheduled miles is a 1.3% decrease from FY26, and that's really from a full year of those minor service efficiencies that began in January of this year. The planning department is still looking for opportunities to make minor service changes. So we will, in the next versions of this budget, hopefully have the final scheduled service available, and that'll be reflected in the final figures. On the paratransit side, that's a little different. It's not based on schedules. It is demand-based, and it's billed on revenue hours rather than revenue miles. And so we're projecting a 9.1% increase in billable revenue hours for next year, which is really the driver of that department or that operator's expenses. So on the personnel side, we're not proposing any additional headcount changes from the FY26 amended budget. For wages, we have all of the collective bargaining agreements in place. So that's for ATU, IBEW, SMART, and the TEOA. All of the groups have a 4% increase in FY27. Most of them will have a 4% year over year impact as well. It will be a little bit higher when looking at that annualized change for TEOA, just because they did just receive a 7% increase in February of this year. For management employees, we're assuming a merit pool of 4%. And then once again in FY27, we're not continuing the performance improvement program bonus, which used to be 1% of payroll. And so that program is just put on hold as we face the financial headwinds. On the fringe side, we've done an initial projection of the healthcare costs, and we're projecting 22.3 million in total costs. So that's about an 8% increase overall, led by premiums increasing by 3.3 million. And then the employee contributions are expected to increase significantly once again by 1.6 million, or about 32%. That's based on the collective bargaining agreements and the forecasted premiums. On the pension side, we will be reflecting the $4.8 million decrease in the San Diego Transit self-funded actuary contribution. That was due to the amortization change that was just approved last month at the board level. And then on the CalPERS pension side, we're expecting about $1 million increase overall for the MTS contribution. For purchase transportation, so that budget is really determined by service levels as well as the contractual rate changes. And so at this point, service levels are decreasing at 1.3%, likely a little more. And then on the major fixed route contract, the fixed cost component is increasing by 3.1%. The variable rate, which is billed based on a per revenue mile basis, and that's the majority of the contract costs, are increasing by 2.9%. On the Transdev minibus side, the fixed costs are increasing by 4.5%, and the variable rate, which once again is the majority of those costs, is increasing by 3.7%. And then paratransit, we are forecasting that 9.1% increase in demand. And then the fixed cost is increasing by 4.5%, and the variable rate for that one is increasing by 1.8%. For outside services, so the current requests from all the departments in the FY27 budget reflect a $2.5 million decrease from the FY26 amended budget. Most of that's in the repair and maintenance category, and it's mainly due to reducing the budget for tie replacement. So we're bringing it from 3.8 million in FY26 down to $1 million in the FY27 budget. Other outside services are remaining flat. We are building in contractual increases, but we have less little one-time projects, and so that's kind of a net zero right now. Worth mentioning that our current security contract expires on December 31st of 2026, so halfway through our fiscal year. We will need to come up with a forecast for that. We might add a little bit extra dollars, since typically we see larger increases when we execute a new contract, but we're gonna still need to take a deeper look at that. I did list out all the kind of major operating projects that are one-time in nature. So these are the things that are kind of new spending or that stand out versus your typical recurring maintenance contracts and things like that. I won't read through all of them, but please feel free to ask any questions and we can answer those. So energy, so we need to finalize the bus service levels before we can do these full projections. Also, especially with the conflict right now in Iran, we need to see March and April data before we can finalize that forecast. Currently, at the time of building this presentation, the Department of Energy was forecasting a 7% increase year over year for the CNG commodity rate, which affects both our CNG and our electricity rates. Just ran a more recent report yesterday that suggests only a 1% increase, which was not expected. But either way, our local market can differ substantially from the national movement and the national prices. We always pay more than the national prices, and recently it hasn't really been moving as in lockstep with the national changes due to our own kind of local infrastructure, pipeline, and storage issues. For FY27, we're currently not planning on fixing prices for either CNG or electricity. We look at this every year, and typically we would pay a significant premium just for that budget certainty. We're not concerned about being able to balance this year's budget, and especially with more uncertainty added to the picture right now, we don't think we want to pay that premium. On the risk management side, based on the initial forecast, we're projecting a $2 million increase or 14%. Premiums, which is our property and excess liabilities, is expected to increase by 1.1 million or 11%. That's based on our estimates right now. We should have our actual policy amounts within the next couple of weeks. So we do want to include the final actual policy amounts when we receive them. And then the budget for claims is increasing. The FY27 budget will assume partial payback of any insurance reserve usage that we use in FY26. So really the takeaways from this, passenger revenue is a major concern. The fare study is currently underway, and that final decision won't be until June, which is after we need to adopt our budget in May. So we do plan on using the MTS board decision scheduled for April at this point to build our assumptions for that. And then just as mentioned, we're likely looking at flat to very low growth ridership. On the sales tax side, we have Sandag's forecasts and we will be using those, but they are at the end of the day forecasts. You can see in FY26, they were revised significantly upward halfway through the year. And there's still uncertainty around those figures, especially with the ongoing economic conditions. We have the tariff decision, unemployment, record stock prices, and now the conflict in Iran, which can, affect that consumer behavior. And so these growth assumptions have a significant impact. Like we know what we'll be using for 27, but more so on the 5-year and our short-term strategy to get through 2030 when we'd be going for a potential revenue measure. So we'll be looking at all those things. Fortunately, this year, the expense growth should be relatively modest. So we don't have any service increases. We're actually looking, at service efficiency improvements. Most of the personnel costs are increasing 4%. Then we have some decreases on the fringe side, coming off of last year where we had all the new CBAs and had a 7% increase in year one. So coming off the last few years, 4% will be relatively modest. And then on the outside services, we're really focusing on necessities. So if it's in our budget, it's because we've had pretty thorough discussions that it needs to be done and can't be postponed or spread out over additional time. But as mentioned, we still have a ton of work to do here. So we'll be building out the full operating budget. Preliminarily, we are estimating to be about in the 100 to 115 range for a structural deficit, which is within what we've been presenting. So it's not it's not that we're missing our 5-year forecast number dramatically, but we still have a ton of work here to do. So last slide, just kind of look ahead. So we'll take the same presentations to the board next week. Then we'll come back to the EC and board in the beginning of April with a full draft of the operating budget so we can look at numbers associated with these assumptions. And then our hope is to bring a final draft to the EC and board in mid-May where we'd be looking for that budget adoption. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we currently have one. Ken, if you can please unmute yourself.
Hi. For FY 2027, before MTS tries to get more revenue from passengers by raising fares, I'd like to point out that the LA Metro is much larger and more complex than MTS, and yet their fares are substantially lower than San Diego. I recently took the Metro C line and A line from LAX to downtown LA, and the fare was only $1.50. Why are public transit fares so much higher here over Los Angeles? And I think Council Member Elo Rivera is correct. There's too much fat on MTS. Oh, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
For FY 2027, before MTS tries to get more revenue from passengers by raising fares, I'd like to point out that the LA Metro is much larger and more complex than MTS, and yet their fares are substantially lower than San Diego. I recently took the Metro C line and A line from LAX to downtown LA, and the fare was only $1.50. I'm wondering why public transit fares are so much higher here compared to Los Angeles. And I think Council Member Elo Rivera is correct. There's too much fat on MTS.
That concludes public comments, Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. We will now open committee member discussion on this item. This is an informational item, so no motion is necessary. Let's go to Director Elo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, some of this just kind of bleeds over from the last conversation we were having, and relates to some of the other items we'll discuss, especially as it, especially on fares. I am curious, though, no surprise, about progress on non-fare revenue. Anything worth noting right now that is maybe not part of the presentation and can't be banked on yet, but we're hopeful or optimistic could come online during the next fiscal year?
Yeah, so I haven't done the full advertising revenue forecast or the energy credits, which are really some of the big drivers in that other operating category. I don't have, like, I know the marketing department is always exploring additional opportunities. I don't know specifically what yet, but we still have to get together and come up with that budget. It's one of the smaller items, so we haven't put the time in yet to do that, but it'll be coming in the next presentation and the final one as well.
Okay, I appreciate knowing that. And then we discussed at one point in time about getting together with San Diego Community Power and doing an assessment of what opportunities there would for either revenue generating projects or cost offsetting projects. Is there any update on the state of those conversations?
So we actually just met with 4 or 5 of their team members, I think on yesterday or the day before. And so the purpose of that meeting was just to really, do introductions, and they really offered, as far as most of the discussion was around us purchasing the commodity. They typically do offer a slight discount versus SDG&E. For us, we purchase our commodity from Calpine, and instead of a 2 to 3% savings, we save about 30%. So from that front, there's not much benefit from that kind of relationship, but it was very clear that they want to be involved in the discussions. They let us know some grant opportunities for infrastructure, things that we did not know about.
Yeah.
So those discussions will be ongoing, and was really kind of the start of that discussion and relationship was a couple of days ago. So it's not only us from finance, but our Zeb and sustainability manager was also in those discussions. So there's different ways we'll be able to work with them.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. And yeah, whether it doesn't sound like, and I'm not surprised to hear that the direct purchase isn't necessarily the major, it wouldn't be that impactful. However, given the substantial assets that that MTS owns and has control over, there's just got to be something there. So I'm glad to hear those conversations are happening. Look forward to continue being updated on how that can, again, either bring in revenue and or bring down costs for us. I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Elo Rivera. Any further discussion of this early look at the FY27 operating budget? Then let us move to the other side of the table, and we are going to take a look at our 2027 capital improvement program, and we're going to get this presentation from Mike Thompson.
And while they come up, I will be joined by Eli Belknap, who's a senior project manager for their capital projects team, and Mike Weigand, who's our chief operating officer for bus. And I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge Eric Chang. Eric, can you stand up? Eric's our transit asset management program manager, and he really drives the annual CAP process for MTS. Thank you, Eric. Before we get to the CIP, we'll do a little bit of background, and we've sort of touched on some of this already, but we did have some financial sustainability board direction from November. to move our ballot measure from November 2026 to November 2028. And as part of that recommendation, we did talk about shifting $50 million per year from the operating budget to the capital budget. So that is being built into here. We also have a goal of $10 million in operational savings beginning with this next operating budget, but that would exclude service changes. And then also to continue pursuing any additional funding from regional, state, or federal sources, and just trying to get more options of any type of revenue we can. That's top of mind as well. And then as a reminder, the goal is to balance our operating capital budget through fiscal year 30. So we have a chance to go to the ballot and give the public a chance to decide what they want to do for funding for MTS, and also gives MTS time to react if a ballot measure is ultimately not successful. So I want to take a quick moment to talk more about this shift of $50 million from capital budget. And part of the reason we made this recommendation back in November is we have made a substantial investment in keeping the MTS system in a state of good repair. Over the last 5 years alone, we've spent over $700 million on CIP projects for state of good repair. We currently do not have a backlog of deferred maintenance. We're up to date on everything we feel we need to be doing. And even with that $50 million shift, we're still going to have $107 million for projects in this fiscal year 27 CIP. And there is some savings as well on the revenue side, revenue vehicle side, as we are purchasing a few less buses because we've lowered our bus fleet to match our service levels. So over the next 4 years, we are going to have a very tactical approach to state of good repair, not just addressing things when they've reached the end of their useful life, but really looking at the condition. And when the condition requires it, we will be able to replace those assets. But if we can stretch it for a couple more years, we'll be trying to do that as well. The other thing we're going to be doing over these next 4 years is looking how we budget the actual funding. If this funding is not going to be spent for a year or so, we would spread it out over 2 fiscal years, CIPs, just to really try to match cash leaving with the funding as best we can on this program. Normally, we just fund a project and it takes a couple of years, but it's funded in the beginning time. We're going to try to be a little more tactical that way as well. I'll turn over to Mike real quick.
Good morning, everyone. Mike Wygant, Chief Operating Officer here at San Diego MTS. So just a little bit of history and kind of a status on the ICT. That is our transition to zero emission vehicles. We've been transitioning all the way since the late 90s at this agency as part of what was the urban fleet rule. That was the first process or regulation in the state of California to kind of transition away from diesel. And that's where we took the alternative fuel path with by 2016, 17, we're basically out of the diesel business. We did have some outliers in our commuter buses. They were on an exemption from the urban fleet rule because there was nothing available. But then those were replaced with CNG in 2021. In 2018, CARB modified the urban fleet rule to what we know the ICT, or Innovative Clean Transit. That is going away from an emissions reduction regulation where each year we had to reduce our output to a technology regulation saying you will now buy these vehicles with the governor's goal of being 100% zero emission by 2040. The chart in the bottom right is what the regulation required as a purchasing requirement. Your fleet didn't need to be made up of that percent by that year, but each one of those years you had a purchasing requirement, 25% in 2023 and so on of your purchases had to meet the requirement. So we presented a rollout plan that not only the CARB approved, but the board approved to try to meet that goal. More recently, there's been, as part of the regulation, were 2 comprehensive reviews of the regulation and the status of how the technology had advanced. The original regulation had a lot of milestones that they had projected as it relates to fuel costs and electricity costs, vehicle availability, grid capacity. And so through the process, twice so far, they've had to do this comprehensive review. The most recent one, which was done by CARB and also by the governor's office, GoBiz, has kind of presented some real challenges for transit agencies. They kind of missed the mark on things like the cost of the vehicle and availability. I'll go through some of that a little bit later. But that review was completed. The final report should be out soon. So next page. So some of the details of the ICT or the GoBiz report showed what we already knew, and we have made a recent adjustment. It may sound familiar to you on the last ZEB update that we gave last year, but the cost, not only inflation increased drastically, but the gap between the cost of a CNG bus and a zero emission bus has increased drastically. You can see the numbers there of what a 40-foot CNG vehicle costs at 840,000 compared to 1.2, or for the 40s, and then the battery electrics are 1.4. On the 60-foot bus, it's 1.2 compared to 2 million, and then the hydrogen bus obviously has an increase over that. The infrastructure estimates at our agency have also increased. Right now, our transition plan total cost, some of that money we've already spent, is $487 million. To actually do this full transition, you may remember we also need to get the Clean Transit Advancement Campus up and running. Some of this transition is very significant construction projects that would impede our ability for continuity of operations at our existing 5 divisions. If on your way out, if you haven't seen it before, you can look at Imperial Avenue Division. You can see that more than a third of our facility is actually under construction to support the overhead charging. The original ICT rollout plan that the board adopted in 19 and going into 2020 showed a $600 million delta from our status quo. In other words, over that until 2040, that's basically 20-year timeframe, we were going to need to secure another $600 million to complete the transition within the regulation. With inflation and just the limited OEMs and limited availability, that number has actually grown to $833 million. So as part of this information, in the regulation were what we called off-ramps, the ICT regulation. They laid a groundwork for ways for agencies to slow this down, with the intent of really it would be counterintuitive to tell a public agency that you have to reduce service to actually make this transition. The idea was there would be a lot of funding and that the cost of this transition would actually become much more parallel with our existing costs. That has turned out not to be true. So the off-ramps become a hot item. They can be out for whether it's a fiscal emergency for your agency, which I think with our issues, we're in that category. If you're unable to cover the additional cost for the transition, that $844 million for us, or the vehicles themselves are unavailable, or the range requirements are unavailable. So those are things that have become a hot button with the ICT and CARB right now. This agency actually applied for an exemption for our paratransit vehicles, the class 4 vehicles. They were supposed to be at 50% starting in January. Just earlier this week, we were granted that exemption because those vehicles, they do exist, but they have a range of 70 miles. They cost 3 times the cost, and our usual vehicles go in the 180 to 190 range. So they have granted our exemption for the first year for that. And as the board had directed with some of this information late last year, the whole process is being slowed down slightly, because at this point, we can't meet that core objective of continuing this transition without reducing service. The federal and the state money has backed off quite a bit. I mean, we are operating our electric buses basically at the same price as our CNGs are, maybe even a little bit, and they're early in their life, maybe even a little bit cheaper. And that may switch, but the infrastructure and the added cost of the vehicle clearly is more expensive. The South Bay Division, we're delaying phase 2 of the overhead structure. The Imperial Avenue Division, that has been funded, that's under construction. We hope to have that up and running by the end of this year. We do have 20 to 25 vehicles that have been funded, and it's in what we call green money. It can only be used for that. So when that construction is done, those vehicles will come in. The Kearney Mesa Division, we do have the design completed and the construction out for bid. Based on those results, again, we do have some money that is identified exclusively for green projects. We wouldn't want to concede that. And, you know, a key to continuing this transition when money becomes available is having the infrastructure in place. The East County, we've completed the master plan like all the divisions, but we're not moving any further with that project. And as mentioned, there's still some more zero emission vehicles coming in that are procured. So, but no other added infrastructure until we can find in either a more secured or defining funding place or process for this, because we don't want to reduce our service to pay for this transition.
Thank you, Mike. Some more background that we added to this year's presentation, and there's a new schedule. It's attachment F that includes all of the existing projects. These are all the projects that have been funded in previous fiscal years that are still open, and the schedule will show each project, how much budget was approved and where the expending is at, whether how much has been encumbered or encumbered is basically committed, or how much has actually been spent, and then the remaining budget in each project. And you'll see there's over 100 projects listed there. We have over $892 million of funding in those projects. And there's about 220 million or remaining budget in those projects that hasn't been committed yet. Eli is going to go through some highlights of existing projects as well for us.
Good morning. As mentioned, my name is Eli Belknap, Senior Project Manager, filling in for Heather Fury, Director of Capital Projects. So I was going to give an update on a few projects. First one would be the KMD bus shop hoist replacement project. That was recently completed in October 2025, total value $4.5 million. It was a state of good repair project based on multiple failures of the existing in-ground lifts that were original to the Kearney Mesa division. It included 12 in-ground lifts in the maintenance shop and 1 at the tire shop, or 13 total lifts. The existing piston style lifts were replaced with new single post, 2-post, 3-post, and platform lifts. They also had 25-gallon hydraulic fluid reservoirs, so they were all self-contained. So we got to get rid of all the hydraulic fluid piping and distribution in the maintenance garage, as well as the above ground storage tanks. So they are smaller, more efficient, and with the movable posts, they're more flexible for the 40-foot and 60-foot buses, as well as having a platform lift so you can perform different maintenance on different types of lifts. 2 other projects would be the VMS sign replacements. That would be in 2025, orange, blue, green line VMS signs are upgraded to new color signs to match the mid-coast sign functionality. As you can see on the left, that's the newer color sign, much more visible, easier to see, where the one on the right is the older VMS style. So again, keeping the VMS units in a state of good repair. In similar fashion, the public address upgrade project, it's currently in the design phase. That's upgrading the PA system at all orange, green, and blue line south trolley stations to ensure similar consistency with the mid-coast stations. Another state of good repair project would be the trolley track improvements. Total contract is $5.97 million. It's replaced the scope of the project is to replace about 10,000 ties in the blue line, as well as reconstruct 4 grade crossings and remove sidings from commercial streets. So as you can see in the picture, older state of asphalt around tracks, and the new crossing with the precast concrete shows kind of keeping those projects and areas in a state of good repair. Another ongoing project would be the Meyer Boulevard slope improvements. It's a slope stabilization and drainage improvements along the blue line. South, it's near East Meyer Boulevard in San Isidro. There has been there will be extensive earth moving and deep pile foundation construction to support 675 linear feet of new earth retaining walls. It's scheduled to begin in March this year, and total budget is 6.2. So the pictures kind of show the area where there is that slope that is sliding with those next to those adjacent residences. So we'll be installing a new slope stabilization and wall to prevent the earth from continuing to move. Another one, which hopefully is well known, is the Orange Line signal improvements. The first phase is about a $27 million contract. And this project also includes or incorporates numerous state of good repair projects. So overall, the first phase includes 21 new signal houses, 3 cases, 8.3 miles of signal cable, 16 new switch machines, 2 crossovers, and 3 pedestrian crossing replacements. So again, it's taking multiple state of good repair projects and compiling them into one. We are currently under construction now with anticipated completion late 2026, or currently 40% complete. Next would be the second phase. That project is estimated to cost $55 million. That includes as well similar state of good repair replacement projects for 27 new signal houses, 4 cases, 22 new switch machines, 4 crossovers, a new diamond at Baltimore Junction, 9 grade crossing replacements, 3 station track replacements, and about 7,700 linear feet of rail. So that's estimated to start in fall of 2026, be complete in early 2028, and we are currently bidding the construction contract.
Thank you, Eli. Well, now we'll move on to the actual fiscal year 27 CIP, and we'll start with the revenues. Our recurring revenue streams are all in place for next year. These are streams that we receive funding for every year, and we just share between operations and capital. It includes our federal formula funding. Those grants already have been apportioned, the revenue's already been apportioned, so we can draw those grants for this 27 CIP. Transportation Development Act funding, we plan to shift $50 million and leave our normal sharing formula in place to put some TDA in capital. State Transit Assistant, as Gordon mentioned, we put $11.3 million in the operating budget and the rest in capital. So it'll be about $19 million in capital for that. And then another formula funding is the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program funding. We'll get that every year, so we program that as well. Our non-recurring revenues are things that we don't get on a formula basis that could pop up and disappear from year to year. They're one-time in nature, and they do include any sort of competitive grant programs that we received. It also includes the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program. We did get some very large awards in this area over the last 2 years, and that is primarily funding the Orange Line Improvement Project that Eli just talked about. We also have some Senate Bill 125 funding in here, both from the TIRCP side, and then in the out years, we will have some zero emission transit capital program funding as well. So, and there's also other one-time funding, prior year carryovers or transfer from closed projects always included in the CIP is this non-recurring revenues. We do have one major competitive grant award that we just received announcement on earlier this month. FTA's grants for buses and bus facilities program. It was a $388 million nationwide competitive program. Over 300 projects were submitted. 223 projects were considered highly rated, but only 98 projects were able to be awarded, and MTS did receive one of those awards and received $14.26 million towards the Kearney Mesa Transit Center. We had recently purchased this land last year, so we have now been able to completely reconstruct this transit center. And once this grant is obligated in the fall, that design process can begin. In future fiscal years, we will have to match 20% of that award with local funding, but we're not planning for that right now because we're not going to need to FAT funding within the next year. So this next slide looks at the dollars associated with each revenue stream. You can see net federal dollars is about $37 million in the CIP. Net TDA is at $4 million this year with the $50 million shift to operations. State Transit Assistant is about $19 million. We also have state of good repair STA funding of about $6 million. And then you can see the LCTOP about $9 million. Those are our recurring funds. They make up approximately $70 million by themselves. And then at the bottom, you can see all the non-recurring funding. It's about $33 million of one-time funding in this year's CIP for a total available spend of $107.6 million for the 27 CIP. So as we develop the project list side, we do have some guiding principles that we follow. It's basically listed in Board Policy 65 under Transit Asset Management, and it states that MTS is committed to effectively manage its transit asset and maintain its system in a state of good repair to support safe, efficient, and reliable transit services across the organization. And this is a large investment every year. We do have billions of dollars in assets that we need to replace in our 20-year CIP look. It's over $3.6 billion over the next 20 years that we need for state of good repair. That's an average of about $180 million a year alone just to maintain our existing assets without being able to build anything new. And as a reminder, MTS is required to comply with applicable maintenance regulations of the FTA, also the Federal Railroad Administration, and the California Public Utilities Commission. So we do base our capital project prioritization and other asset management decisions on the asset's criticality, the condition, performance, as well as available funding, safety considerations, and on the evaluation of alternatives that consider the full life cycle benefits, costs, and risks as part of our overall policy. So this development of this year's CIP began last September. Each department across the agency updates their 20-year look at their overall CIP, and then actually submits project requests that cover the next 5 years in detail. And then each department will also prioritize their needs for the coming year. And then all of that is consolidated on an agency basis. And then a capital projects review committee reviews it and prioritizes from there to match the project needs versus the available funding. So projects typically with the safety and our operational needs are priority 1, and the committee reviewed and CEO approved the prioritization, and all those priority 1 projects were able to at least be partially funded this current fiscal year. And then after that process is complete, a Title VI analysis is also conducted on the project list, and no disparate impact or minority populations or disproportionate burden on low-income populations was found. And that is included, that analysis is included as attachment E at the agenda item. With all that said, the submissions for the next 5 years from all departments totaled $1.2 billion. The majority of that is state of good repair related. Over $700 million alone is state of good repair. And you can see the categories in the table on the right. It includes $300 million for bus and rail revenue vehicles. It includes $83 million towards facility and construction type projects, and then $247 million towards rail infrastructure and $57 million to other equipment. But also, the 5-year look also includes other initiatives of over $500 million. This does include the Kearny Mason Transit Center that we just talked about. It also includes all the zero emission dust charging infrastructure. It's still in our 5-year need, even though it's not going to be able, most likely not be able to fund it in that period without additional funding from new sources. And then it also includes the Clean Transit Advancement Campus and then future transit center projects as well in that other initiative category. For just this current coming up fiscal year, there was 191 million in total requests, 42 projects in total. Again, we're only able to fund 107.6 million. We're only able to fund 56% of those requests. And we are putting about $80 million alone into state of good repair projects, or 80% of that total. So the 32 projects funded are included, listed in attachment B, and descriptions are provided in attachment C. On the state of good repair side, we're putting $39 million towards bus revenue vehicles, about $15 million towards facility projects, $27 million towards rail infrastructure, which does include additional funding for Orange Line improvement project, and then $5 million towards other equipment. And then on the other initiative side, we are putting additional $5.6 million towards innovative clean transit projects. This is going to be additional funding that's going to be required for IED and KMD's overhead charging infrastructure. Then the other initiatives is station projects, and primarily most of that is related to the Kearny Mesa Transit Center grant award. So again, that's $107 million of projects being funded. We'll do a deeper dive in each category to show what's being funded and what the out-year requests look like. We always start with the bus fleet replacement, and it's usually the first thing we fund as well. We have a fleet plan in place that looks at the age of the vehicles and plans out the replacement period over the life cycle. And so it's very important to keep not let the fleet get too old, because once you fall behind on the fleet replacement, it gets very hard to catch back up, and it creates, as the buses age and get towards the end of useful life, even after the useful life, they're very expensive to operate and maintain. So we typically try to look at the bus fleet and how long their useful life is and just replace a normal amount every year and smooth that out. We do have over 700 vehicles in the fleet. Most of them are the 40-foot variety. So our 400 alone is the 40-foot variety. And 26 of those are now battery electric buses. We also have 125 60-foot buses, and 12 of those are battery electric. We have the 24 commuter express buses, 34 minibuses, and then on the ADA side, we have 115 vehicles, including 2 new battery electric vans. So we are proposing to fund $39 million in FY27. We plan to purchase 25 CNG 40-foot, 25 battery electric 40-foot buses, That will be for KMD once that infrastructure is complete, and then 13 60-foot CNG buses, as well as 25 ADA buses. So you can see $39 million requested this year. We do have some carryover from last year as we were able to reduce the bus fleet size a little bit. That's helping us fund this next fiscal year. And then over the 5 years, we need $289 million alone just in bus vehicle replacements. For the rail revenue vehicles, our LRV fleet is 168 vehicles in the fleet. These have a 25-year useful life, and the vehicles are much more expensive, over $4 million per vehicle. So typically when we come on a replacement cycle, we start saving for those vehicles a little bit ahead of time. We are just about finishing up the replacement of the SD100 fleet. And then next one would be the SD7 fleet replacement. There are 11 vehicles there that went into service in 2004. So we would typically start saving now to replace those. However, we're going to hold off on that for now based on today's service levels. We don't really need those existing vehicles. It would be $53 million to replace those 11 vehicles. So we'll delay that most likely until after the ballot measure, and then not start saving for this currently, or not start planning on replacing these until we can see how that ballot measure goes. But again, over the 5-year period, it would be $42 million in requests listed, but we're not planning on funding that at this point in time. The next category is facility and construction projects. And as a reminder, we do have a number of maintenance facilities. We have the trolley yards and buildings A, B, and C that are behind us down below. We also have the Imperial Avenue division down the street, the Kearney Mesa division. We have a South Bay bus maintenance facility. We have an East County bus maintenance facility, and we have Copley Park division, Kearney Mesa as well for our ADA and minibus fleets. So all those facilities require annual upkeep and keeping them in a state of repair. We also have all of our passenger facilities that require upkeep as well. We had 15 projects submitted for fiscal year 27. Of those 15, 10 projects were funded, primarily all, actually exclusively all passenger facility related. The full list is in attachment B, as I mentioned, but we had $8 million of bus facility projects that we were not able to fund. We'll defer that until the need becomes more urgent. And then of those 10 projects, again, it's $14 million being funded towards passenger facilities. And then over the 5-year period, we have $25 million alone in bus facility needs. We have another $6 million of rail facility needs planned in that 5-year period, and $53 billion of passenger facility needs over that 5-year period. On the rail infrastructure side, we do have a nearly $5 billion in total rail system assets. It's very expensive to build a rail system. It's also expensive to maintain that rail system. So on the rail infrastructure, we break it into sort of 2 categories. First is the track projects, which are anything related to the physical ties, which includes the rails and ties and the ballast and the drainage around that, and then special track work and grade crossings. Then the maintenance of way side is actually where the track runs through. So it's the bridges and the elevated track and the right of way, and also includes all the electrification and the signaling. So we sort of break those types of projects in 2 categories. We had 10 projects submitted for fiscal year 27. 8 were able to be funded and 2 were not able to be funded, had to be deferred. It's $27 million in total for these projects. Most of that is going towards the Orange Line Improvement Project. Another $18 million is being funded in this current fiscal year, and we'll have to fund additional amount in fiscal year 28 as well to complete the Orange Line Improvement Project. On the track side, we're funding $24.4 million in projects. And on the MOW side, we're funding about $3 million in projects. And the overall need of this type of project is $246 million over the 5-year period. Other equipment installation projects is many different things. It's a lot of maintenance equipment at the bus and rail facilities. It's also a lot of IT infrastructure and network costs. So this next year, 9 projects were submitted, 8 are able to be funded, 1 is not being able to be funded, it'll have to be deferred. Partially that, $1.5 million of that is in the operations side for equipment for the maintenance groups, and then $3 million is more on the IT side that's being funded in the current fiscal year for a total of about $5 million of other equipment budgeted in this proposed budget. So this next slide just looks at state of good repair, and it looks at the overall 5-year period. You can see we're funding $85.5 million in this proposed CIP. And then we're deferring about $17 million of what was requested in FY27 that couldn't be funded. And the overall 5-year need here is about $718 million, again, just for state of good repair. And that exceeds what we see as our available revenue streams, especially with the $50 million being shifted to operations. So we will have challenges to meet the state of good repair needs, but we do, again, we feel we're in a good place with where we've invested to this point in time that we can able to sustain this period. So non-state of good repair, there's basically 2 categories here. It's the innovative clean transit type of costs, and then all the other initiatives of new initiatives that we include. So on the innovative clean transit side, we are adding funding towards the IED and KMD overhead charging projects. Those are primarily mostly funded, but we need to add $4 million more for Kearney Mesa, and then $1.7 million more for Imperial Avenue. That will be included in next year's CIP. We're basically deferring everything else here. We really needed to get started on South Bay Phase 2. We also need to start working on the Clean Transit Advancement Campus. Both of those are really nice to have at this point. There's not something we can afford to do, unfortunately. But you can see the overall needs. If we wanted to continue with our 100% transition plan to battery electric buses, we need to keep building new infrastructure at all of our facilities. Once you finish one phase, you go back and start another phase at each facility. And there's an extensive cost on that. That's $200 million alone over the next 5 years, just to keep up that process, not including the cost of the buses. And we would also need space requirements in that Clean Transit Advancement Campus. That's something that we would need as well. That's $240 million, another $240 million towards that would be required to do a full transition. So our other initiatives are generally new things we want to do at transit centers. This includes the Kearney Mesa Transit Center that we got the major competitive grant award for. It also includes additional funding for the Meyer Boulevard pathway beautification. And it also includes $1 million placeholder towards the transit amenity improvements in advance of the new policy being finalized. So in total, we're funding those 3 projects for $16.4 million. And the need over 5 years for this type of project is $67 million. So this next slide sort of rolls everything up. You can see $700 million of state repair projects over 5 years. We have $518 million of other initiative projects over those 5 years, which is primarily the ICT stuff. So the total project needs over 5 years is $1.2 billion. As of right now, we have identifiable revenues of about $400 million. That does include $200 million being shifted to the operating budget. Otherwise, it would be $200 million higher. So we are looking at a very large deficit here. We're only about 35% funded, and there's $800 million deficit. As always, we will continue to go after all types of competitive grant programs to help fill not only the state of repair side, but any new initiatives that we want to do as well. So our target just gets larger when we don't have as much revenue identified. And that concludes the presentation, and I'll bring you to the staff recommendation. And the staff recommendation is that the MTS Executive Committee recommend that the MTS Board of Directors approve the fiscal year 27 capital improvement program with the estimated federal and non-federal funding levels, which was attachments A and B. And as the federal appropriation figures are finalized and our other project funding sources become available, allow the CEO to identify and adjust projects for the adjusted funding levels. We also need the board to recommend that the San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG Board of Directors approve the submittal of our grant applications for federal sections 5307, 5337, and 5339. And in accordance with this fiscal 27 CIP, and then also recommend that the SANDAG Board of Directors approve amendment number 16 of the 2027 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or RTIP, in accordance with the 27 CIP recommendations. With that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we currently have one public comment. Ken, if you can please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, for the Kearney Mesa Transit Center, did MTS consider adding a residential real estate component to the facility? Kind of like the residential real estate on top of City College Station? Did MTS consider adding a commercial or real estate or retail component? I mean, does MTS even understand the concept of being a landlord and collecting rents? If not, then MTS is an organization with no vision and no leadership. Why are public transit fares so much higher in San Diego than Los Angeles? How can MTS raise fares in FY 2027 when they're already so much higher than Los Angeles?
That concludes public comments, Chair.
Thank you. We will now open committee member discussion on this item, beginning with Director Moreno.
Thank you for the presentation. Do we do this type of overview on a yearly basis
Overview of open projects.
of capital? We're discussing capital improvement
We
projects.
do
right?
almost this exact presentation every year from the 27 CIP on, but we did add the open projects information about that. And we also did more background based on giving you more highlights in the board direction and the ICT status.
Got you. Well, thank you, because I think this is the most extensive information I've ever received. That's why I asked, do we do this on a yearly basis? And I think this is something that we should potentially do, knowing that things change and, you know, we're going to have to modify the capital improvement projects that we target. I recognize that the state of good repair is at the forefront, right? We get some of this federal and state money with understanding that we will keep our infrastructure in a state of good repair. I have a lot of questions. Let me start off by, do we have a breakdown for the 107? How much is encumbered for our ZEB initiatives? Did we?
Of the 107 that
Separate
we're funding next year, only 5 million is going towards, 5.6 million is going towards the ZEB projects.
Got you. And the first number that we started off with is $236 million for our capital improvement projects. And you state in your backup document that 72 million is preventative maintenance. Is that not state of good repair?
That is state of good repair in the operating budget.
Got you. Okay, so state of good repair in the operating budget.
So our federal dollars can be used for capital projects or preventive maintenance. Preventive maintenance ultimately goes into the operating budget, is part of that revenue stream.
Oh, so this part of the 72, excuse me, part of the 72 is for operating?
Yeah,
For our operating budget?
yes.
Got you.
Yeah.
We need human beings to do the work, is essentially, right? Keeping our state of good repair.
Right. And
Got
it's also like maintaining buses is not capital related, but it is a state of good repair thing as well.
Absolutely. Okay, I understand. Also, I think it would be good for us, for transparency purposes, to state who the capital projects review committee, who sits on that committee. I think it would be good just to showcase that. I don't know if it's MTS workers. I don't know if board members sit on that committee. So I think it would be good for us.
Yeah, it's basically made up of internal MTS staff as well as Sandex staff.
Got you. I think a little more information, like I said, just for transparency purposes, would be good. Also, let's see. The equity study that we did a few years ago, how is that utilized in our capital improvement projects?
There's a Title VI analysis done every year. I'm not sure which.
It was the
social equity
listening
listening tour.
or is it
projects.
even used?
Yeah, we have projects that are ongoing. So we have a lighting program on the at the bus stops, and several others.
Okay.
But it's incorporated in the capital improvement program over time.
Thank you. And I think that falls in with the committee, the Capital Projects Review Committee. We did the listening tour essentially to let us know what folks are, what our clients basically want to see.
Yeah.
Understanding that the state of good repair, I will mention this like 500 times, the state of good repair is at the forefront of everything we do. But I think it would be good for us to merge the two documents, the equity listening tour with what with our capital improvement projects. I don't know if there's a scoring system that the committee uses. I think a little bit, once again, going back with a little bit more information would be good to showcase why we are doing the projects that we're, or why we chose the projects that we chose. Obviously, I'm very happy to see the Meyer Boulevard slope, the Iris Rapid, Meyer Boulevard pathway beautification on several lists. And that was my other question. So attachment B is what is being funded with the $107 million. Is that correct?
It's what is being funded, also everything else that was submitted as well. So attachment P is completely
Everything.
comprehensive. Yeah.
Got you.
Attachment C is sort of a subset of that, and it's just what was funded and gives you a little more details on it.
So attachment C showcases what was funded
Mhm.
this year. Attachment
27.
B shows what has been encumbered and what. No.
Attachment B shows what was submitted for 5 years.
Got you.
For 5 future years.
Okay.
Yeah, and there is a lot of information. Attachment F is what's already been funded.
What has already, and can you explain attachment D?
Attachment D.
Statistical analysis for projects.
Attachment D is the 5-year forecast, I believe. So
Okay.
it looks at the revenue streams and the project requests over the 5-year period, and does similar to what this summary version looks like. Similar to what this is. That's attachment D.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not clear what attachment. Can you tell me in layman's terms what attachment D is?
Attachment D is a 5-year forecast for the CIP. We're looking at the revenue streams and the project requests and what our funding level is on that.
But there's only like 10 projects on here on attachment D. Oh, got you. I'm looking at attachment D, statistical analysis for projects. Okay,
That,
maybe I'm looking at something different and I'll ask afterwards.
But that's from the title. Just for the record, I think what you're looking at is attachment D to the Title VI analysis.
Gotcha.
So there was a little bit of confusion because there's multiple documents called
I
attachment. So I
apologize.
apologize
No,
about
no.
that. Yeah.
No. I was very confused, but what you said earlier is extremely clear about where we could find what. So the other thing is congratulations on the grant. I think that's humongous that we went up against that many entities and that we were awarded, and it speaks volumes to the staff, the great staff that we have here. So congratulations. We need to continue applying to all the grants that we're able to get. I did want to mention that I noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the workshops that were conducted for phase 2 outreach were for Linda Vista, City Heights, Southeastern San Diego, National City, and El Cajon. I will point out the blue line was represented in National City, but I will always make a pitch for our workshops to be in District 8, where the hub of the blue line. I think I've mentioned this 500 million times. You guys get to hear me until December. San Ysidro Intermodal Transit Center, or San Ysidro trolley, is the most utilized trolley in our system. 11,000 people jump on that trolley, 11,400 on any given day, numbers that you guys have presented to us, especially given the previous item that we heard with the dip in ridership in the trolley. I think it behooves us to do more outreach in the San Ysidro or even Iris Avenue station. So the other thing that I will point out as well is the community engagement for phase 2 it states that workshop information and communication toolkits were shared with various CBOs, including Casa Familiar. I've heard on several occasions, not necessarily from Casa, but from other nonprofits that they need money to be able to put together communication packages for the community. And I think MTS has the capacity on its own to do workshops in San Isidro. I'm going to vouch for District 8 because that is what I represent in the city of San Diego. So I would strongly encourage us to do outreach, especially when it comes to workshops and just communication to the district in person. I think is always a better bet as opposed to online. A lot of the folks that utilize the system are there is a digital divide. I always tell folks the city of San Diego, 10% of the population doesn't have internet, and we have to remember that. So I will always make a push for that when we do workshops and things like that. Let me see if there's anything else. I think that concludes my comments, but just this is, like I said, this is great information for the public to see what MTS is working on and why we're working on what we're working on. I think just a little more communication and a little bit more transparency would go a long way. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Moreno. Let's go to Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for a very thorough presentation. Let's go to slide 21, please. No, actually slide 5. Let's go back to 5. Mr. Weigand, I think you said earlier that the change is 833 million. It wasn't long ago that you said it was going to be 600 million. So if anything that the pandemic taught us is that the cost of capital really is a guesstimate because supply chain costs, labor costs, all these things, tariffs now have to, we really, it's tough to guess the cost of capital campaigns. How good do you feel about that 833, or is even that at risk of going up beyond $1 billion?
So you're absolutely correct in almost all your assumptions. The 600 million delta, and again, that's the delta. If we stayed with the alternative fuel path of just CNG, we need 600 million more to complete this ICT transition. That was in 2019 numbers. That's where that 600 million came from. With the help of consultants and the industry, it was like a year-long deep dive. We even ran pilot buses, you may remember, here at this agency to kind of get our own real cost of electricity and meetings with San Diego Gas and Electric. Yes, we just completed late last year the revision to those numbers, and that 833 is encompassing inflationary numbers that were not, we projected inflation in the 600 number, but not to the hyperinflation that we've seen. Also, a lot of missed marks from a regulatory agency, as it relates to what was going to happen with bus suppliers, where there's now a lot less suppliers of the equipment than there were in 2019, actually. There's some grid costs that have escalated at drastic amounts. So how good do I think that number is? I think that number, if we could do that whole transition this year, that number is really good.
And the key is this year, because we don't,
right.
We're watching gas prices rise a dime a day now.
And
so we never know.
Tried to make escalations that are reasonable, but not what we've seen in the last 4 years.
Sounds good. Okay, let's go to slide 21, please. Thank you. So it's good to know that the useful life between a CNG and a battery electric is the same. That's one cost. The other part is the ongoing maintenance. What can you tell us about the ongoing maintenance costs of the battery bus versus a CNG bus?
Good question. First off, that chart shows the minimal useful life per FTA. If you use federal funds, it has to run 12 years or 500,000 miles, or as you go down the chart, 7 and 5. We have buses, that right at 12, we got to get rid of them because of some of the costs that Mike mentioned earlier. There's some that we've already stretched to 13 or 14 years. As far as the maintenance costs, we track that by each sub fleet. We even do a cross comparison on the battery electric buses that we have today compared to a baseline CNG fleet, so the same age and the same mileage. What we're seeing, again, on the what we call the operating costs, so the cost of maintenance and the cost of fueling, or the cost of maintenance and the cost of charging, from 2019 till today, or at the end of last month, we look at it every single month. We've actually saved a little bit of money on the electric vehicles. Huge caveats with that, and that's to date. Like last month, the month before last, it was actually more expensive on a micro level. And it does vary, but as vehicles start to age and they come off of warranty, of course, your cost per mile goes up for the maintenance aspect of it. We're seeing the battery electric buses start. We started off basically saving a quarter per mile, and that number has gotten less and less. And that's as the batteries age and they start to fail and they're off of warranty. Their repairs are more expensive than the CNG ones that fail when they're off of warranty. So I think over the life of the vehicle, it will probably be, very equal, or maybe even start to get a little bit more expensive. Nothing like the hydrogen that you mentioned earlier. The other factor is right now electricity rates are pretty consistent, and we are avoiding peak pricing. We are avoiding high demand by when we charge because of the size of the fleet. When the fleet scales at a larger amount, it's reasonable to expect that I'll have to start charging on more peak pricing times. And so that will also start to catch up.
Part of our fleet requires buses with a range more than 150 miles, the max of a battery bus in today's technology.
Correct.
So we can't replace 100% of our fleet with battery electric buses because of the technology limitations. What percent of our system could be with battery buses, and where are we at? 60%, and today we're at 40%. How much more do we have to go?
So when we started the transition, the fleet, the blocks, that's the total daily usage, the vehicles that go out every day. The average block length was 147 miles. Now you have like the 235, it goes 510 miles, way out there. That's the rare outlier. And then we have a lot of trippers that were in the 60 or 70 miles a day. But if you looked at all of the blocks, the 560 something blocks that we send out every day on a weekday, 47% of them could cover with the technology on the first generations of electric buses that we got, because they went about 140, 130 miles when the batteries were new. We haven't seen a lot of degradation. On a positive note, the newest generations of electric buses are going about 180. They'll go a little further than that, but you can't plan for the one day that the AC didn't work as much. So that covers about 62% of all of our blocks. Still nowhere near the 235 at the 500 miles, but there has been, and it wasn't in our, if you looked at our transition plan, you'll see that we planned a certain percent of increase in efficiency each year. It didn't kind of go like that. It was kind of flat, and then all of a sudden it jumped up. The limiting factors are obviously the density of the battery, the maximum weight of the vehicle. We're working with the state right now and through the regulatory process to get some exemptions, continued exemptions, so that the buses could be a little bit heavier for a little bit longer. That may also promote growth. But to answer your question, 61% with the newest range, the newest vehicles.
Sounds good. Let's go to slide 22, right next door, please. You've got, Mr. Thompson, you've got 55 million. I guess where I'm going was back on the earlier discussion of costs just seem to be going up and up and up. This number here on slide 22, and then on slide 24, if you want to go up a couple slides, flat line of 10.5. Should we be expecting these flat costs for 4 fiscal years, or should we also build in some additional cost increases estimates to make sure that we're really looking at as best a number as we can on what we're going to need?
Yeah, and we do build, and the fleet plan is a very large document with all the different series of bus listed, and we do build in the inflationary expected inflationary costs in that fleet plan. We try to smooth this number out. So if we have 1 year where we need 13 CNG buses, 13 60-foot buses, that's a very expensive year. So we try to fund at a rateable level. So when we have those big years where we need to purchase 60 footers, for example, we don't have a spike in funding that year. We sort of level it out. So that's why these numbers are very smooth, is we've purposely leveled out the funding level to account for different types of spikes in each individual year. But there is cost assumption built into the base price in each year.
Makes perfect sense.
And
Thank
same thing with the rail, is we've built in the inflation into that $53 million number, and then we've just spread that $53 million number out over 5 years, is basically how we funded that number.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Goebel. This is an action item with a staff request that the Executive Committee forward a recommendation to the MTS Board of Directors. I will go ahead and make a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
And we have a second from Vice Chair Goebel. Seeing no further discussion on this item, clerk, please take the vote.
Members, if you can please make the selections on your tablets. We still have one more member to vote. Chair, the motion passes with 5 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
And
Oh,
could I request from the committee direction on the length of this presentation? You know, this committee asked for a real deep dive, as you're all the budget development committee. Could we truncate the CIP presentation somewhat? Maybe remove some of the discussion about existing projects and things like that.
For the board presentation?
Yes, only because you all have the responsibility to sort of vet this a lot more intensely than the board itself, and they accept your recommendations too, so.
I, you know, without knowing what we have the agenda in front of us for the meeting, but I would, if I were on the board and not EC, I would want to see the presentation in the way that it's been presented.
Okay. Item 7 is a Senate Bill 125 allocation package revision, and Mike Thompson is going to have this presentation as well.
So we've talked a little bit about Senate Bill 125 today, but just as a reminder, Senate Bill 125 was a one-time funding allocation from the state to transit agencies. MTS was set to receive $284 million over 5 fiscal years. That includes Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program funding, also zero emission transit capital program funding. So we've already received the FY24 and FY25 funding allocations. That was about $195 million. We're hoping to get another $59 million this spring that is currently in the original state budget. So we'll just, hopefully that does take place and we get it a little bit later. And then in the out years, we are expecting to get some ETCP in 27 and 28 that's dedicated towards zero emission capital projects. So again, a total of $284 million. As part of this one-time funding allocation, MTS must submit an allocation package to CalSTA detailing how we intend to allocate those funds. And we submitted that program a few years ago. We've also submitted updates to that program in the past. So the allocation package simply just reports to CalSTA the decisions made by the MTS board. So they just confirm that allocations are being used in accordance with the guidelines of those revenue streams. And that's basically it. So there's no guidelines about how often we need to update this. But we do like to update it as board policy changes. So we have made a number of decisions at the board level over the last year that we just want to reflect in the updated allocation plan. This includes last February's action related to SB 125 to delay future trolley service enhancements in FY26 and beyond, and also delay future planned bus service enhancements targeted for 27 and 28. And that was basically to help with our structural deficit balancing. And then in November, we sort of extended that even further with the goal to get our fiscal cliff extended from early 28 to early 2030. So, and that was to help us move the ballot measure back a couple years. It also allows us to do the shift into the operating budget to balance. And we already talked about these other board direction that we get was from November to help us get to 2030. So we basically want to reflect all of that in our SB 125 allocation package. So the TASE revision really just puts that into paper, and it's going to remove those trolley and bus service enhancements that we had not already been implemented in those future years. That's a $42 million savings. It's also adding about $3.5 million to Iris Rapid to account for actual annual operating costs over our initial program estimates. And this is really the actuals for 2020, 24 and 25, and then the projections for 26 and 27. And then we were removing about $1.8 million in security enhancements. This again is actuals for 24 and 25 and our updated projections for 26 and 27. And basically to account for our ability to hire and retain those officers that we put in the original plan. It shifts all that savings to the structural deficit balancing again to get us to 2030. And it modifies the amounts of funding between the fiscal years based on our updated budget numbers. So this next slide just looks at those projects by year. And again, as a reminder, FY 24 and 25 are now actual numbers. So those are changes were just based on what the real expenses were. 26 is the new amended budget number, and then 27, 28, 29, 30, they're all projections at this point based on the current data. So you can see we've moved the dollars in the service out a little bit, and then also put all that extra money into the structural deficit balancing for those out years. So these changes are now reflected in the allocation package and the narrative in the package as well. And again, to make sure we can balance our budget through FY 30. Then with that, we bring to the staff recommendation is that the executive committee forward a recommendation to the board of directors to approve the revised SB 125 allocation package in substantially the same format that was included as attachment A.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
All right, we will open committee member discussion on this item. If there is any, it is an action item to forward the recommendation to the board of directors. I will make a motion to adopt the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
We have a second from Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp. Seeing no further discussion, clerk, please take the vote.
Members, if you can please make your selections on the tablets. Chair, the motion passes with 4 members voting yes and 3 members absent.
Thank you. Item 8 is an update on the fare change study. Mark Olson and Israel Maldonado will provide us with this report.
All right. Well, good morning, Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate this opportunity. Again, I'm Mark Olson, Director of Marketing and Communications for MTS, and joining me is Israel Maldonado, the Director of Fare Technology and Operations, and we're giving you an update on a fare change study. So just a little bit of background. This is part of the broader financial sustainability strategy that MTS has to extend the fiscal cliff beyond 2028. And as part of that, MTS voted about, the board voted about a year ago to work with SANDAG and NCTD on this fare change study. So as part of the strategy for filling the financial gap that we have, it's about $500 million, $528 million over the next 4 fiscal years to push out this fiscal cliff 2 more years to about 2030. So the needs change from year to year, but ultimately we need somewhere between 118 million and 146 million. And this is 4 main buckets that we're looking at this strategy in. And you've been hearing a lot about that today in the previous presentations. But one of the big pieces here is the capital program, where we're shifting non-essential capital funding over to operations. Then the reserves in SB 125, which you just heard about, and then miscellaneous operating things like non-fare revenue, like advertising and other belt tightening things that were talked about earlier. But then the 4th piece to this is fares and service. And so as part of this strategy, we're looking over the next 4 years to gain about $93 million to extend this fiscal cliff out a couple more years. So what does that translate to? That translates into about $23 million a year over the next 4 years that we're looking to find funding from through either fare increases, and more fare revenue or service modifications. So what is this now, boiling it down even further, of the $23 million that we're looking to get every year for the next 4 years? That represents about 26% of all of our current fare revenues. If you compare that to service, and what does that $23 million mean? For an order of magnitude, you can see it's a significant amount of service there. It means all Saturday bus and trolley service. It means all weekend bus service at 24.2 million. You look at all Blue Line service 7 days a week, that's $22.3 million a year. Or if you look at all Green and Orange Line trolley service, that's $23.5 million per year. So it's a substantial amount of service for this $23 million piece to the puzzle. So as part of this fare change study, we did a phase 1 of outreach back in the fall time period from October 6th to November 7th. We had about 5,700 responses to a survey that we put out to everybody to start to see what the balance was between the cost to ride versus service levels. What do people want us to prioritize here with this process? And overwhelmingly, what we saw, people wanted us to prioritize service levels over the cost to ride. People wanted to see youth and senior pass prices preserved as much as possible, even if other categories have to pay more. If we do have to do increases, people thought that a phased approach to the increases was preferred. And then people also thought that increases to one-way and day passes were more acceptable than over the monthly passes. And so with this, what we did is we started developing a couple packages and to take back out to the public, and I'll hand it over to Israel to talk through the package development process.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, board. Over the course of several months, staff from MTS and SANDAC worked together to develop packages that focused on increasing revenue, but specifically on ensuring that revenue was reached to approximately 50% of the estimated $23 million budgetary gap, while also considering ridership losses, price sensitivity for SDM riders, and the rider willingness to pay a little bit more to keep service levels as high as possible. All this with the intent of pushing out the fiscal cliff into 2030. But how do our current prices compare? In this slide, we have 6 of our peers. If we look at the adult one-way, which is for us, for MTS, it's $2.50 for the adult one-way. And we also have a $6 adult day pass. If we look at how the prices compare for our peers here, our prices for the adult one-way and adult day pass are in line with our peers. Where we're not in line with our peers is when it comes to the adult monthly pass. Our pass is at $72. Our peers are head and shoulders above that price level. And now the packages, the proposed packages. Package A includes a 50-cent increase, taking our adult one-way from $2.50 to $3. It takes our SDM one-way from $1.25 to $1.50. The adult day pass would rise from $6 to $7. The SDM day pass would rise from $3 to $3.50. And the adult monthly pass would rise from 72 to 90, and for SDM from 23 to 30. Package B has higher increases for the adult category, raising the adult one-way to $3.50, while maintaining the SDM one-way in line with package A. The adult day pass would rise by $2 from 6 to 8. The SDM day pass would also stay in line with package A at $3.50. The adult monthly pass would rise from $72 to $100, and the SDM monthly pass would increase from $23 to $28, $2 lower than proposed in package A. So what are the estimated impacts for each of these packages? For package A, we are projecting an annual revenue increase of over $11 million, but it comes with a estimated ridership loss of over 2 million rides. At a high level comparison between package A and B, package A has the lower increase to the adult fare, but higher SDM month pass. The combination of lower day pass and one-way fares projected lower revenue, but with more service impacts and overall lower ridership loss. Package B, the higher of the two packages, is forecasted to increase revenue by 16.8 million with a ridership loss of 3.2. High level comparison between these packages, again, referring to package A. Package B has a higher adult fare, but lower SDM monthly pass. A greater increase to the adult day pass and one-way fares. Estimated higher revenue, which should lessen service impacts, and overall higher ridership loss. And now the phase 2 engagement goals.
Okay, so now after we developed these packages, we wanted to go talk to the public with them about it, have some conversations and see what they think. We wanted to listen to the reactions to the packages. Was this totally out of the realm of possibility? Was this something that people would just walk out of the room on us on, or is this something where they kind of understand the financial situation that we're in? They understand if that costs of everything in their lives are going up. So it's expected that the costs for MTS are going up too. What's their overall rationale and reaction? We wanted to see what their tolerance levels were to the increases, understand some pricing sensitivities. Was there anything that stood out with these packages that just seemed out of line? And then ultimately what we wanted to do with this phase 2 is, help us inform a final package to bring back to the board for consideration at the April 2026 meeting. So we framed the discussion around 4 questions, and these questions all involve, things that we talked about in the phase 1 of outreach, as well as, prioritizing the packages. So we asked the question again, after seeing these packages, is cost or service more important to you? And then if you had to pick one package, obviously this is a tough choice, but which package would you choose? And then we talked about the phased approach a little bit because that was preferred in the phase 1 of outreach. So, we wanted to talk about a phased implementation with that higher adult monthly pass price package, that package B. Over time, would this impact your preference at all? And then we also asked a question about fare capping, to limit the overall increase of any kind of fare increases. If we eliminated fare capping, which some of the studies that we worked on with Sandag showed that if we eliminated the fare capping capability, we could possibly get that price and still meet some of our goals, but get that price below $90 for the adult monthly pass. And everything kind of follows that monthly pass price. And so that was something that we asked people too, to see if they would, if that would impact their choice at all, and would they support eliminating fare capping. And so we did this in a few different ways. We held in-person workshops. We had about 80 participants spread over 5 different workshops in Linda Vista, City Heights, Southeastern San Diego, National City, and El Cajon. And we wanted to make sure we were talking to people in person about this, because you get a much different reaction than you do just with an online survey. You can feel the room, you can see what people are talking about. You can have just those kind of on the spot conversations about things. It's very helpful in that respect. But we also wanted to make sure we were casting a wide net. And so we did an online survey with these questions and had that all the same information available on our dedicated webpage. And so we had that from February 5th to March 5th, and had about 800 respondents to that. And then we also wanted to talk to our riders directly. So we went out to a few different transit centers there and talked to riders about this, about the packages. So I think what we found, and these results are consistent between all 3 methods, the workshops, the online survey, or in person at transit centers. Even after seeing the packages, what we saw was that riders definitely prioritized, service levels over the cost to ride, even after seeing these packages. And I think one thing stood out at one of the workshops that we heard. One woman said that, it's really hard. Once you lose service, it's really hard to get it back. And so I think that was really her priority. She didn't want to lose any kind of service near her bus stop, because sometimes it can be very difficult to have that come back. And we thought that was pretty impactful to the statement of why people support the service levels over the cost. Service is just a very big priority for people right now, and having that as high as possible so they can they can have that to depend on. But as you can see here, cost to ride versus service levels, the service levels were in the 80% range as people are more transit dependent, riding 7 days a week. That support wanes a little bit, but it is still over the 65 percentile throughout all the different rider categories. With the package preference between A and B, we saw it at about a 50% split. It was shifted between the two categories of infrequent riders or riders who ride 3 days a week or more. But really it's about that 50-50. And I think it really goes to show you that people want to see service levels stay as high as possible and want us to gain the revenue that we need. So I think that was very, very interesting there. With a phased approach to the packages, what we saw here is that both with infrequent riders and with frequent riders, that support for package B goes up to over, close to 80%. Would choose package B if it could be a phased approach. And then with fare capping, eliminating that, I think people, once you talk to them about fare capping and they understand it and realize the benefits of it, where you're not going to pay more than a day pass in a day or a month pass in a month. And we have those caps for people available. I think, people really saw the value in that. So across, pretty much all of the different frequency of riding, we saw that people would prefer to pay a little bit more to keep that option for fare capping and being able to pay as they go. That support wanes a little bit as you get into riders who ride more often. But overall, we saw more support for keeping fare capping in place. So we are going to work with Sandag on the more comprehensive look at all of these results and run some crosstabs on it and see if anything else is worthwhile to bring up or moves the needle, or that'd be worthwhile to bring to the board next week. But overall, what we're seeing is the high level results is that more people still favor to keep service levels as high as possible, even if they have to pay more. And there was a split evenly pretty much between package A and package B. Senior riders tended to favor package B due to the smaller increase in the SDM fare. A phased approach, if we do go with package B or something like that, where it is a little bit higher of a adult monthly pass they thought that was more tolerable to phase that in. And there was not overwhelming support for eliminating fare capping, even if the fares are below $90 for a monthly pass. So with our timeline, we will be coming back to the board next month with this report. NCTD is also doing their outreach right now, and they are going to be reporting to one of their committees later this month. The plan as it stands right now is to come back to the board with a final recommendation at the April meeting. And then we would go to the Sandag Transportation Committee at a meeting shortly thereafter to get their consideration as well. If any kind of fare changes did happen, we would not implement this probably until the fall, just because we want to have some time to educate riders on the new fare structure, change out all the materials and things like that. So that's the timeline that we're considering right now. So with that, thank you for this opportunity, Chair, and we're happy to answer any questions and take comments to continue this process.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do. Ken, if you can please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
In your list of peer transit agencies, I think it's ridiculous that you didn't include Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, I can go from Chatsworth to Pomona, like San Fernando to Long Beach. I can go from almost anywhere in Los Angeles to anywhere else, like including the beach in Santa Monica, and it costs a lot less than the transit fare here in San Diego. The LA Metro fare is like $1.50 or $1.75. So like, why are public transit fares so much higher in San Diego than Los Angeles?
That concludes public comments, Chair.
Thank you. We'll now open committee member discussion on this item. This is an informational item, so no motion is necessary. We'll begin our discussion with Director Hilo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. obviously these are tough conversations. We have to balance, our financial sustainability with the affordability for riders. I stay very, very committed to making sure that fare increases are a last resort. I want to make sure that I understand what's happening in April. What will the board be asked to do at that time?
Well, at that time, we plan to come forward with a final package that would have specific numbers to it. It doesn't necessarily need to be the numbers that we saw between package A and package B. I think as staff, that's our opportunity to gain this feedback now from you and then at next week, and then help that inform the decision where we would come back with a specific package for fare increases.
To approve?
Yes.
And at that time, would we also be presented with a full assessment of all potential non-fare revenue opportunities?
I don't know if that's on the board agenda or considered for April, but I think that's something, we can certainly put together.
Yeah, we could add that into the FY 27 budget presentation.
That's super important to me. Again, we've wanting to make sure that before we ask our riders to pay more, we've made sure that we've done everything we can to bring revenue in from other sources. And then I'm curious about strategies that are being explored or that would need to be approved in this action related to the major events that are coming to Southern California. The 2026 FIFA World Cup, 2028 Summer Olympics. San Diego is not a host, but will benefit from those in terms of visitors. How are we accounting for that?
We haven't put together those year budgets yet, but ultimately, there's a cost associated with running the extra special event service if we have to. It also depends on whether they'll allow us to keep open the stadium station at Snapdragon for the Olympic events there. There's some indication that they're not going to allow us to do that, in which case then to service the station.
Who's the they in that scenario?
I can't remember if it's the Olympic Committee or if it's is it the Olympic Committee? But due to safety concerns, they may not allow rail operations to the stadiums that are serving the Olympics. But I just learned this myself a couple weeks ago.
It sounds insane.
Given the times we're in.
I think there's other ways. I would imagine that there's other ways to make sure that it's safe. I mean, we're spending anyways.
But we are certainly part of the conversations,
Okay.
And we will be looking at that as we build future budgets.
In the same vein of just making sure we're leveraging that before we ask residents and our riders to pay more. The last thing I'll ask, if we go back to one of the slides that has the different scenarios, and I appreciate the work that's been done to engage community. One concern I do have, though, is as the cost of the monthly pass increases, the ability for lower income folks to purchase that pass becomes more difficult, even though it's a better value. And I am always concerned about actions that we take at the government level that poor people are always paying a tax for being poor. They're not able to buy things in bulk. They're not able to access discounts in the same way. And so is there a weekly option that can be presented? Is there a way to break the fee up? What I don't want to have happen is our lowest income folks paying way more. And if we're accounting for this through our Pronto Pass, that's super helpful to know as well. I just want to make sure that poor folks are not going to be paying more than $90 a month because they're not able to come up with $90 all at once.
That's a great question. And that's the whole point of fare capping. Fare capping ensures that customers are not overcharged over that threshold. So they can load $20 one week, they could load $10 on one day. And the system during that time frame of that month accounts for all their.
And that will, that will stay in place. We
Yeah.
won't divert from that in any way whatsoever.
And based on the feedback that we receive from the public, it's an appreciated feature.
Yeah, because
Mhm.
it's like all throughout their lives, they're paying more, knowing they're paying more because they don't have a pile of cash sitting, on any given day. Okay, that's again super helpful for me to know. I want to make sure that that is like explicit and easily accessible. And again, super important to me when I make a decision on this is to know that we've done everything possible to maximize non-fair revenue before we ask our riders to pay more, understanding full well the problem that we were trying to solve for, and that that's not going away on its own. It's just an obligation I think we have to fulfill. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ela Rivera. Let's go to Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. To be clear, if you're saying fare capping is not just for the day, but for the month as well. If I'm a senior, I won't pay more than $90 under one of those scenarios, even though I pay it $10 at a time. I'll never pay more than 90.
Could we go back? I think so. Let's go here. So one of the things about fare capping that's not so great is that it's confusing, right? It's confusing, but it actually has a lot of benefits. So let's use the senior example. In this example here for package A, the monthly pass is set at $30. If an SEM rider loaded $5 one week, $8 the next, and of course, as they're tapping, the system's keeping track for that month. When they were to reach a total of 30 spent, they wouldn't be charged anymore.
Okay, because their account is flagged as
Correct.
a SDM account.
We call it capped. It's been capped.
Okay.
Fair capped. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
Thank
and you might even look at the day pass situation. So if a senior only wanted to ride one day a week and they bundle all of their discretionary trips on that one day, they'll get charged the $350, $350, $350, $350, and they'll never reach the $30.
Or
in a
once
month.
they do reach the pass is a different kind of product.
Right.
So theoretically, they could spend more than $30
No.
if they go
No.
350 at a time.
No, so there's two layers to the capping. There's the daily, explained very well by Sharon, 350, you're capped for that day. But that 350 goes into a pot that keeps
Okay.
track, right? So 350, now you're up to 7 on your way to 30.
Okay.
And so once you hit 30, you're capped for the month as well.
Because my account is profiled as an SDM pass. or
Correct.
Profiled as a month pass, my account.
Correct.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now, there's another component to this that's not recognized yet. There's a difference between price and value. Price is just one component of value. And we certainly can soften the blow of a price increase with a perceived value increase. And there may be an opportunity to look at I know years ago we had a loyalty program. I think it's something Rider Insider. He Paul did it back. Okay. When you have a loyalty rewards program that you either earn a free pass or you earn a cup to take with you on the trolley, something like that. Okay, I had to pay more for my pass, but you know what? This is a good value for me because the service is better. I just feel better. That security is better. They appreciate my business by giving me this things. There's value that softens the blow of a price increase. I'd encourage us to look at that. I realize the agenda item is a price increase only, but I think there is an opportunity to soften a price increase with a value increase.
Great point. We actually have a project on door here that is a customer rewards program that would integrate to the system, provide the customer with a gamified experience to incentivize certain ridership patterns, to incentivize that experience, a loyalty program, as you described. So that's something that we're looking into a very close detail, and we'll work with our executive staff to hopefully move that forward.
I think it's a great opportunity. I remember years ago going to Petco Park and seeing a Padre sales rep come down the aisle with a bag of goodies for somebody who was a season ticket holder. And they were more frequent in their use of Petco Park, whereas we were not that kind of a tender. So we didn't get it, but it's certainly interesting to see the value and appreciation for somebody who had reached a pinnacle, a measurement. And even our riders could say, you know what, this is an incentive for you to ride more often because you get this reward. That's another way to soften a price increase. If you feel like you get some value back, it's good for anybody at any income level to show appreciation.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Let's go to Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. Just one question. How many people have we engaged total on this package 1, package B, kind of full comprehensive presentation?
We had over 700 survey responses to the online survey. We had approximately 80 people attend our in-person workshops. And then we probably engaged with 30 to 40 people per transit center.
Okay, per transit center.
Yeah, per transit center outreach when we were out there, 4 different locations.
So the per transit center engagement, what does that look like? Was that the same as the in-person?
It's not as in-depth as a workshop because people are on the go. So you can kind of grab them, you know, when they're walking by, talk to them a little bit, let them know what's going on. And then, you know, a lot of times we'll just give them a flyer that has like a QR code to go take an online survey. If they'll engage with us in a further discussion, we're happy to do that there, but that's typically what it is because they're on the go.
So with those, is there a possibility those will be duplicate numbers with the survey numbers?
Yeah, when we've looked at that, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
But you did say phase 1 outreach was 5,700 surveys.
Correct, yeah, phase 1, but we didn't have the packages in that round.
All right, this is an informational item, so no motion is necessary. Thank you for the presentation and the discussion. Item 9 is a review of next week's board agenda. Any questions on the draft agenda for next week's board meeting?
So SB 125, the allocation package revision, we could put that on consent unless you feel it needs to be a full report like we gave here. If it's going to be a report, I'll just move it to a later board agenda.
Yeah, I just would point out, I will have 2 closed sessions. I don't think they'll be extensive, but I definitely need a quorum for both of those. And we do also have the COA on the discussion agenda in addition to all the other items from today.
The one item from today that we wouldn't bring on that agenda is likely item 16, which is the high level fiscal year 2027 operating budget. Because we'll come back to this committee next to get a deeper dive into that one. And then we could move the fare change study update to April as well.
Don't we have a vote on that in April?
Yes, but it would come to the EC first and then come to the board. So you would have the problem that, or the challenge that you wouldn't have shown this at all to the board itself before April.
Let's keep it on the agenda for the board.
Okay.
But let's move the 125 to consent. Does that work for everybody? Okay. All right. Any other staff or committee member communication? Okay. The executive committee's next meeting date will be April 9th at 9 o'clock in the morning. We are adjourned.